I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. If you're here for the bike lane on University Drive, that has been removed from the agenda and the public appearance tonight. Those of you who are here for that may wish to leave, but we do welcome you. Yeah, reconsider. We have an approval of the official agenda, and I think that we have several items of interest that some of the aldermen have asked me to move. Matt, I think you were one of the first ones to ask for a movement on the board business of item G, which pertains to letters of interest submitted for the appointment of field vacancy of Parks and Rec to be moved up. If you could, and would you like to, do you have any specific place you'd like to add that?
I think as we've done in the past, we've just put that before citizen comments. And the other item, as a courtesy to staff, would be to move up under departmental business, under the Office of City Clerk, the final budget amendment. If we could move that up to under the report from the Budget Committee. I've asked Debbie to be on hand just in case there's any questions from the board.
Move it up to where?
To board business under C, report from the Budget Committee.
Mr. McLaurin, did you not have something that you would like to add as well?
Under board business, and it'll become 9G, I guess, report from Infrastructure Committee.
Okay. Anyone else with any changes? With those changes, do I hear an approval of the official agenda, please?
So moved.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The approval of the minutes of the City of Starkville Board of Aldermen, regular meeting held June the 6th, recess meeting of October the 3rd, and recess meeting October the 19th. Do we have approval of these minutes?
If we dealt with these separately, I'd move approval of the minutes of June 6, 2006.
Second.
Approval of June the 6th minutes. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right.
Also move approval of the minutes of the meeting of October 3rd, 2006.
Second.
We have a motion with a second to approve October 3rd meetings, 2006. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Were there any corrections on the October 19th?
I didn't do those, Marquita did.
Okay. And I was not at this meeting, so we'll need someone else to offer that motion.
Do we have anyone else who's willing to offer the motion that we approve the minutes of October the 19th?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Ms. Tindall, that gets your minutes approved there. We're down to comments by the mayor and Board of Aldermen, and one of the first items that I have is that we have received a grant for the solid waste recycling for the amount of $15,000. And I believe that's not a proposal, but that's an actual reception of that. Is
I
that?
was notified by Clerk Benson and TV that we received that and be on the lookout for paperwork associated with
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Brewer. That brings us up to item G, which is consideration of a letter of interest submitted for the appointment to fill the vacancy of the Parks and Rec Commission. And I think that we only have one person that has applied. Is that correct? Is this person here tonight?
It is, Dr. Taggart's here.
All right. Taggart, Ms. Taggart, how are you?
Just fine.
Good to see you again. Come up to the table up here. That you're, I think, the only one that we have that's interested in this particular committee. And that we'll open it up by letting you tell us why you'd like to be on this committee. Or this, to fill this vacancy.
Well, I guess the best way to sum it up is, as long as I've been in Starkville, I just think it has a lot of potential that the city has yet to meet. And as part of my job, I've done a lot of work throughout the state of Mississippi, and in particular worked on some recreational lake projects. And I just see some of the things that are going on in other parts of the states, and I would like the same opportunities for Starkville. And also for selfish reasons, I like to jog and spend time outside and at the parks, and just would like to help make them a better place.
We will now let individual board members maybe ask questions if they have any. Does anyone have questions they would like to ask her?
Mr. Taggart, I know we've all reviewed your application and your CV, and it's obviously very impressive. And I'd like to move that we appoint Dr. Mary Love Taggart to the Park and Recreation Commission. This is a 5-year term, and we're a couple months behind. I should have started July the 1st of 2006, but this term would continue until 6/30 of 2011.
Second.
Motion with a second. Is there any further questions or statements? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? You have been appointed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your interest in being there. This brings us down to citizen comments. Floor is now open for individual citizens to make comments. 3 minutes. Please tell us your name and your ward that you're from.
I'm Patrick Nordine. I'm from Ward 6, and I'm here representing Starkville in Motion. Several weeks ago, Mr. Austin Voller came before you guys asking for more accessible parking for the elderly and handicapped individuals of St. Joseph's Church. And while we've been working in good faith to find a solution for that problem, we have not come to one yet. The city engineer, Bill Webb, came up with a solution that does solve the problem of accessibility. And what this involves is relocating the parking on University Drive to the north side of the street, which is the side that the church is on. And this does provide the parking that was requested, which is handicapped accessible parking. And what Bill Webb suggested was that these parking spaces would be designated handicap spaces on Sundays. Starkville in Motion supports that plan 100%. Unfortunately, this plan has been rejected by the Catholic Church. They do accept that these spaces do fulfill the need that they have for handicap accessible parking, but the issue that they have is that it does not provide enough convenient public parking spaces for their church. I've done several surveys walking out there on Sundays. I've walked my dog over there. It's probably about 4 Sundays now, and I've identified at a minimum of 45 spaces that are within 1 to 2 minutes walking distance from the front door of the church. Now, you guys have done a great job in that Starkville is now in the press for the quality of life issues that you guys have improved in this city, and we'd like to keep that momentum going. The bike lane that you guys have put on University Drive has proven to be very successful. A count that we performed a count back in March of this year, and we've doubled the number of cyclists that are out there in 6 months. The college students, faculty and staff members that are trying to get to school are using these lanes. They're very successful. What I'd like to see in the next coming weeks, since Austin Voller was not able to make it tonight, I'd like to see if the city could do a detailed map of whether they're of the area, to see what the different options that we have, that the city has available to accommodate them. The other thing I'd like to see is an engineering survey done on University Drive. Reason being that it may sound very easy to just allow cars to park in that bike lane, but it would be easy. But what I think an engineering survey would show is that cars will cross the center stripe. It's no longer a center stripe in the physical sense because it's been shifted over. And what you've got now is about 8 feet of parking or driving lane going westbound. The problem with that is that it's not wide enough. If you've got 8 feet for parking and 8 feet for a driving lane, that's not going to be wide enough for cars to be able to go in that distance without crossing that center stripe, which is an unsafe thing. Finally, I'd like to express my disappointment in that I have to come here every time that I suspect that Austin Voller is going to present. It's very frustrating. It takes a lot of my time. And the other thing is that it's very disappointing that we've tried to work with Mr. Voller, and unfortunately, it's not working out too well.
Thank you, Mr. Anyone else? Remember, 3 minutes. I'm going to start bringing the gavel down. If you'll tell us your name and what ward, please.
My name is Charlotte Fuquay. I'm Ward 5. I would like to also represent Starkville in Motion with a further discussion of these bicycle lanes or their elimination thereof in front of the Catholic Church. Very specifically, I would like to address the recommendation or possibility that was discussed of simply directing the bicycles onto the sidewalk instead of onto the street as a possible solution for moving the bikes out of the way so that cars could park. And I would like to say that bicycles on a sidewalk represents a significant safety hazard. I have references to at least 7 different research studies on this, and there's some variation in their results, but they all show that there is an increased rate of collision with bicycles riding on the sidewalk as opposed to the street. That's from anywhere from a rate of 2 to 8 times greater rate of collision bicycles riding on the sidewalk as opposed to on the street. Remind you that college students are not so good about wearing helmets. We have in our bicycle tally counted 10% of the cyclists on University Drive wearing helmets. Personally, I would hate to do something that would increase the probability of collision as high as 8 times with these students who do not wear helmets. Motorists are watching, and I think now have become accustomed to bicycles on University Drive in the bicycle lanes. They're watching the bicycle lanes. They don't expect to see fast-moving traffic, relatively speaking, on the sidewalk. They expect pedestrian speed traffic on a sidewalk, not bicycles. They're watching the street, they're not watching the sidewalk, and this is a situation that could very well confuse and confound our motorists, and this would not be a good thing. And one other item of safety is regard to pedestrians on the sidewalk. And personally, I feel that anybody walking on the sidewalk should feel free to walk on the sidewalk without worrying about a bike zipping around past them. And if you've ever been in a situation where a bike comes silently up behind you, it scares the bejabbers out of you. Or if you hear them and move to the right, only to find that they too have moved to the right, it makes for rather clenched fist situations, at least as far as I'm concerned. Please also realize that in this bike count that we did this fall, where we counted 420 riders on University Drive, the three of us that did this count all noted that there's a rather significant number of these riders, mostly students who are what we consider to be novice bike riders. That means they're really not such good riders yet. They don't have good, strong bicycling handling techniques. And putting them on the sidewalk with pedestrians is not good. We watched enough people making and trying to maneuver the turn from University Drive onto the university's bike lane. I personally moved out of the way on more than one occasion. And we also have some riders, believe it or not, that might be just a bit reckless. In fact, a whole lot reckless. And we've got a number of riders that ride very fast. Many of them are sitting back there behind me. I wouldn't want them on the sidewalk when I was walking. No offense to them, but they're very fast riders. And by the way, there is a slight downhill grade on the westbound lane of University Drive. Bikes can go very fast. So Sunday mornings before and after Mass, there are a lot of pedestrians on University Drive on the sidewalk. And I think putting bikes there would be a very bad idea. Thank you.
Would you please hold your comments to 3 minutes?
Thank you. My name is Ronald Cosman,
Because
and
I got a feeling all you folks in motion are going to be up here when we do have the real.
I have some good news. But first, let me state my name and ward. My name is Ronald Cosman, and my apologies to the mayor, but I am not a resident of the great city of Starkville. However, you do know me probably best as the person who wrote the Lynn Lane project, and I wanted to report to you that...
We're going to give you 2 minutes.
All right. Lynn Lane project is on schedule. The MDOT board should probably be voting the second Tuesday of this month and let us know at that point whether or not we've been awarded the $1.5 million for that project. In addition, we're moving forward with the Safe Routes to Schools program, and we'll probably be submitting a grant of approximately $100,000. That deadline has now been shifted to March 1st of next year, and there's no city set aside on that project. But despite all that good news, I just wanted to come and express a bit of concern, and that is that considering an exemption to the University Drive bike lane would have 2 important implications. First, it would set a serious precedent in the sense that there's no mechanism in place for balancing the needs of public safety and transportation within the community with individual interests. Such exemptions should not be considered in ad hoc fashion, but more importantly, such actions may jeopardize current and future grants that we are writing for bike lanes and civic improvements in Starkville. By demonstrating our willingness to interrupt transportation networks, we place these fundings at risk. And these grants are very competitive, and we do not want to provide our competitive cities with opportunities to undermine our grant proposals and endanger our proposals in the process. So, frankly, it's about the $2 million that we're writing in grants for the city of Starkville. I don't want to see them jeopardized. I think we have to stick to a clear and consistent vision, and 74% of residents favor more bike lanes in town. I urge the council to consistently plan and promote bike paths, sidewalks, and safe routes to schools in our community. Mayor, thank you very much.
Mr. Turner?
Good evening to the Mayor and Board of Aldermen. My name is Alvin Turner. I'm Ward 7. We had some very confusing voters today. Some of them got mad and didn't vote because they got frustrated with the voting places. But they said that people should let them know the difference between the voting places for the city as a whole and as general as a whole. They were very frustrated. The shuttle bus that run the south route have been hit once. We have a lot of drivers that speed in the rain, but that didn't want to get hurt. The only damage was to the bus. But we need some safety. If it takes patrolling with just blue lights to slow the traffic down on 25 and 12 coming back to the campus. A lady stopped in the middle of the road talking on a cell phone. Thank goodness that those buses have air brakes. And on Nash Street, cars parking on both sides of the road makes it very difficult for the people to get through that street. Those are the concerns of some citizens.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Any other member of the public that would like to speak?
My name's Eve Gentile. I'm in, I don't know which, who represent me exactly. I'm here to talk about the bike path. I want to say to the border that I didn't like the idea of putting parking over there. And I thought that it was such a good idea to have a bike path. Last year I got an accident on bicycle on Highway 12, and I still have surgery this year because of a consequences of the accident in bicycle in Starkville. So I think that all the border are making good decisions, putting new bike path everywhere, and now that somebody is asking for parking for people that need their handicap or children that need to be close to that church, I think that they're asking a little bit too much. I don't know if I could say that, but you know, I need to park really close to building because now I need it more than ever. And even then, I could walk a little bit. It's not that if I'm parked close to it, I'm not gonna live or survive. So I think that they're asking a little bit too much. And you did a really good choice putting those bike paths in town. It's a flat town, it's small, and we could bike everywhere, and it's so great that I think that we should encourage people to use them and say to people that need to park that they could use their bike to go there instead of their car, and encourage them to use their bike instead of removing that thing, you know. So I would just want to say to everybody over here that don't do that. It's not a good idea.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other citizen that would like to take their 2.5 minutes? Okay, we'll move on. Tonight we have an appearance by John Wilson on the Octavia County Museum Board.
It's John Wilson and Mary Thornton.
Okay, excellent.
All right. And we don't have 2.5 minutes, so, because we're
No,
on the
you
agenda.
have as long as you want to.
Yeah, well, we won't take forever. And it's interesting to note that the last time we were here, this was the same problem that is going on when we're here again, which is also why we're here, because we have the same problem that we had when we were here the last time, which is hoping we'll get some capital improvements for the building. But as you know, we have our minutes on your desk tonight, so that I thought if we put them in your packet, you would never see them. So we put them on the desk so that you know they're there. And we folded back to a page that shows what's going on. At our September meeting, we were talking and looking at all the things we've been doing. We said, you know, the Board of Aldermen need to know that, because I remember there being a quote in the paper from Dan Camp, our mayor, about my mother told me not to give up. Well, I have that same philosophy, but mine was a little extended beyond that. When I was little, if they said you couldn't do it, that meant you did it. So with the museum, we're still trying to do. And we feel like we are putting our best foot forward to make ourselves known in the community, to become part of the community after the museum had been dormant for so long. But we need the interest of the Board of Alderpersons.
I think we also should remember that the other cities in our area have really very good museums. Like West Point has got a very good museum, and people come there and go to the museum. Well, the people here in Starkville, many of them don't even know where our museum is. And if they come, and it's pouring down rain like it was last night, they might get dripped on because we have a new leak. The whole thing comes down to this. The building belongs to the city. We don't have the money to fix it, and while Mr. Blocker was in charge for a while, he really did do as much as he could do. He has done a good many of the things just to make them safe, like nailing down boards and putting new boards on the ramp and fastening up the railing so that people won't fall off of it. But there are too many things here. Now, I'm an old lady, and I'm at the point that if it's going to be done, I want it to be done in such a way that it's something the city will be proud of. I would like to have it so that there would be young people coming along later that would be willing to work in the museum. We don't have very many young people that come into the museum at all. Almost all of us are getting on up in years. And the young lady that was talking about the bicycles just a few minutes ago, I don't know about everybody else, but I never learned to ride a bicycle. I had a horse, but I did not have a bicycle. And I'm not safe. I would not be safe on one. But anyway, if you will read what we've done, you can see that we are trying to stretch and do more things, but we do need some help with the building. And like I said, it's your building.
Mayor, a couple of questions.
Yes,
Joan, ladies, has a list been done of all the repairs, improvements?
Yes.
Well, Richard has been working with us, trying to work with us, but he didn't know till just shortly that we now have another one for the list, which is the leak in the ceiling.
You know, we've had this discussion before. I simply would like to see a list of those things that need to be done, and then we can see how we will be able to do
Okay.
those things.
Well,
I think he has.
I would be glad to send that out. I had Bill Webb go out to actually look at the building and not only look at what all work needed to be done, but try to get some sort of preliminary cost estimates of what the work would cost. And then I was going to present that to the budget committee to see if they could kind of work with it some. But I'd be glad to send that to the entire board.
You know, it's not that I need it ahead of time. What we need is simply a list of what needs to be done with a cost estimate of what that is, and then we can proceed to see how we might get that done.
that's what
That's
we're
all
here
we
for.
need.
And we will be back.
Yes. When you all when we get it all fixed up, we'll invite you and have cookies and.
We're good at that. We're good at that.
Bill, that is on your list of things to do, is to complete this list they're talking about, or what?
I was working with them on everything I knew of. I hadn't
Till-
heard about
till the
rest,
leak.
but,
Which we didn't know about the last one.
I'll get back with them and we'll go back over to make sure everything is.
When do you anticipate we could have as complete a list as we can with cost estimates?
We could have it, depending on what's come up since Richard and I talked, we can have it next board meeting.
All right, well, let's set that as our goal.
And Richard, when you two guys meet, I'd like to meet with you so that perhaps you don't see all that needs to be done. Okay, thanks a
Thank
lot.
you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Read the minutes.
She'll read the minutes.
The next item we have on our agenda is a public hearing on the modification of planning and zoning ordinance to reflect the change in the composition. Matt, I think this is something that you've been bothering and working with.
That's a scary concept. I guess just as way of introduction prior to the public hearing, the proposed change to the planning and zoning ordinance would be as follows. We currently have 9 members on the Planning and Zoning Commission. Each ward has one representative, and then there's two what we call at-large members. So, for example, today we have 2 wards that have 2 members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then the other 5 wards would have 1. And just as I guess somewhat logical as an economist, it seemed to make sense to me that we have 1 member per ward to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Now, of course, because we have existing members on the Planning and Zoning Commission, the last thing that you would want to do is to make any changes mid-course. And so, in a rare instance of us actually planning ahead rather than being behind the curve, it would be a thought to go ahead and have this ordinance be considered so that when the terms end, which is roughly 2008 of these areas, that rather than replacing those members, we would proceed with a 1 member per ward Planning and Zoning Commission. And there are, of course, philosophical differences to that, and that's one of the reasons why we're holding a public hearing to hear those, because, of course, planning and zoning is one of those areas that is near and dear to all of us because it makes a big difference in what our community looks like. But that's, in general, what the ordinance states and the objective behind the ordinance. It is not, from my perspective, an urgent issue. In fact, it's not on the agenda for consideration tonight. It's just, let's have a public hearing. Let's hear what the community has to say about this. We do have some time on this. This is not like other issues that we have to deal with, whether it be the Heritage Museum or others, that it's a leaky roof, we've got to do something now. This is something we can plan ahead for.
And with that, we'll open it up from any comments from the audience in regard to planning and zoning.
Mayor Camp and members of the Board of Aldermen, I'm Larry Graves of Ward 3. I live at 108 Shadowwood Lane. The president of the Timber Cove Homeowners Association, Joe Baker, was not able to attend tonight as he's working as an election commissioner. So he asked me if I would represent the association and address the subject of the proposed changes to the structure of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Many members of our neighborhood are concerned over those potential changes, and there are several points that I'd like to make along those lines. First of all, we'd like to know exactly what is the problem with the current structure of having 9 members as opposed to having 9 members for the 7 wards. We've worked closely with the Planning and Zoning Commission over the last 5 years and even beyond, and we've seen no problems. Sure, you can have resignations from time to time, and there may be an unplanned imbalance on the commission, as there was last spring or last summer. But you corrected that with temporary appointments, and you can have periodic imbalances no matter how many members you have on the Planning and Zoning Commission, whether it be 9 or 7 or even a greater number than that. Secondly, Planning and Zoning members are not compensated as election commissioners are. There are times when those people, being uncompensated, and you have a little bit more devotion if you're compensated, but they are absent for job reasons, for family reasons, whatever. You could actually have 4 commissioners present with a 7-member commission and still have a quorum to conduct business. We certainly don't think 4 members would be a fair representation of our 7 wards when 3 of those members could decide yea or nay on a particular issue that is coming up. So we would rather see you increase the commissioners to even 14, having 2 per ward, than to see it cut and run the risk of too little representation. And it certainly won't cost any more increased compensation doing that. Finally, when this commission's bylaws were set up, there had to be some rationale for putting 9 members on the commission at that time when you had just 6 wards. We suspect that putting 9 on there was to cover that potential for a shortage of representation. And if you've got a concern that some wards, as has been stated, have more representation than others, then go to that 14 members, or at least set up a rotating schedule for the 2 extra members that you have between the 7 wards. But we would ask you, please don't weaken the commission by cutting its membership. We're confident that that would cause more problems than you would conceive of at this particular time. So I appreciate the opportunity to address you, and you want to ask any
May I
questions?
ask a question?
Okay.
And how many commissioners do you have out of your ward represented?
I think we've got 2.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Tim Barnett. I'm a resident of Ward 3, and I'm president of the Academy Place Homeowners Association, which is an association representing about 85 single-family residences. We're located adjacent to Timber Cove, between Timber Cove and Academy Road, basically. I'm not going to take much of your time. I will say that I agree completely with the concerns just expressed by Timber Cove Association. I would just add one thing. I've had the occasion, fortunately or unfortunately, to attend a lot of Planning and Zoning Commission meetings over the course of the last 3 years. It's been my observation that when developers come before that body with well-thought-out plans that comply with all the rules and regulations, and when they have consulted with and cooperated with the neighborhoods affected by development, that their plans are approved. And when they come before that board with plans that aren't thought out well, and when they haven't cooperated and consulted with local neighborhoods, those plans are usually not approved. And isn't that what we want the Planning and Zoning Commission to do? My concerns are basically that the commission isn't broken, and I don't see any need to fix something that isn't broken. And we would oppose any suggestion that we should reduce the number of members from 9 to 7. Thank you.
Again, your ward, I believe, has 2 representatives, is that correct?
I just learned that,
Right.
yes.
I'm Michael Queeson from 225 Garrett Road. I'm in Matt Cox's, and my mother, where I used to stay with, is in Perkins's ward. I don't know the numbers. But Matt Cox, do you know how many are in your ward?
We have one currently.
And I think also in Perkins's ward.
Yes, sir.
And I'm concerned, I think also it came up with the Parks Commission, that our side of town is woefully represented on several boards. And I think this is one of them. And I think the north side of town is as good as any other side of town. I've lived there for over 30, 40 years, and proud of that side of town, proud to be a resident of that side of town. And I think Max Cox has done well to get us a recycling back at our fire station, which I often use before and appreciate. But I think I speak for a lot of people on the north side of town. I think we're often neglected and ignored. And I'm very happy to have Matt Cox fighting for us. And I think that this is woefully imbalanced. I'd like to know where the other ward that has 2 is. Is it also on the south side of, is it on the south side of town?
I guess west central part of town.
Okay, so at least,
Ward 1.
but I don't think, if we're gonna make 14, well, that sounds exciting. Maybe it's gotta be 15 to have odd
The
numbers.
meetings will last 4 hours.
I agree with you.
Say something.
I agree with you. You're very wise in those type of things. So I think 7 is a much better approach. Thank you.
Anyone else would like to have a comment?
Mayor and Board, I'm Charles Henderson. I'm in Ward 1. I have attended most of the Planning Commission meetings for the past several years. The present commission and the previous commissions, of which Ms. Self was chairman, have done an outstanding job of making the ordinances that were properly followed and enforced. The ordinance was established in 1986 as 1986-5, creating a Planning and Zoning Commission. Commissioners must be registered voters of the city. Membership totals was 9 members, 1 from each of the wards, plus 3 at large, but no more than 2 from one ward. Some of you may remember 3 or 4 years ago, we did not have a member from Ward 5 because the vacancy occurred, but no one from Ward 5 applied. Therefore, the alderman offered the spot to Ward 6 because he had somebody that applied, and of course, this made 2 from Ward 6. In the last several months, there have been 1, 2, or 3 commissioners who were not able to attend monthly meetings due to work-related or personal reasons. If the commission were reduced to 7 members and 1 or 2 were not to attend the meetings, that would leave 5 to make the decisions. Since the chairman cannot vote unless there's a tie, only 4 commissioners then would remain to make the decisions on the request brought before the Planning and Zoning Commission. I request that the commission membership remain at 9 and any registered voters be allowed to apply. However, that no more than 2 be applied for any one ward. And yes, Mayor, there are 2 from our ward. But in case of Ward 3, the chairman is from Ward 3, so he doesn't vote. So you only really have 1 from Ward 3 that is present as far as, unless there's a tie. And this could be rotated around, or I would not be opposed to having 2 from each ward if you want to do that. Thank you.
Anyone else?
My name is Dr. Kellermans. I'm the Vice President of the Lakes Homeowners Association. Based on the arguments presented by Timber Cove and Academy and by the previous speaker, we are opposed to the change as well and would like to maintain the number 9. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Marnita Henderson, and I live in Ward 1, and I represent 2 people. I'm Dr. Lynn Wampler for just a minute. She's working the polls. She objects to any changes in the membership makeup and the requirements for it. She wants it to be available for anyone who's a registered voter. And I also am against any change. And I've spoken about many projects with people from all different wards. And the planning and zoning people don't represent just the ward they live in. They represent the entire city. And so therefore, if you have a problem in 5, then you can call Ward 1 and they will represent you. The reason we have an extra one in Ward 1 is because we actually were in Ward 6, and when they rezoned and changed the lines, then we became moved over into Ward 1, so therefore Ward 1 has 2 instead of 1. And but I just would like you to leave it as it is. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, very good. We'll close the public hearing on making modifications to the present planning and zoning. Did you have a question?
Just a point of information before we move on, is that, it's only been since, I guess, July that Ward 5's only had 1 member. Before that, for the first year of this term, they actually had 3 members based upon reapportionment and this, that. And before that, they had 2 members. So just the implication of underrepresentation for long terms. It's just Ward 5 has happened to be caught up in rotations and terms and people moving off. No intentional underrepresentation.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I was actually going to make that point. That was actually what the first thing that pointed this out to me is someone said that when they redistricted that all of a sudden you have 3, and it seemed patently unfair, and you're always concerned about dilution, but that's absolutely the case. And
yeah, that was just as a point of information.
Okay. I close the public hearings on modification of planning and zoning commission at this particular point. We'll may take it up at a later date. Brings us up to the mayor's business, and I've asked Mr. Schaefer to come tonight after our work session that we had last week in regard to potential budgeting of the police station and its reconfiguration and work.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes?
I received a call about 4 o'clock this afternoon, and I did commit to making a statement to Mr. Roy Perkins. He called me and asked that this report be put off to the next board meeting due to he's not able to be there at the board meeting tonight. So I'm just relaying the meeting to, request that he made by 4 o'clock this afternoon.
Well, I don't see the relevance of putting the report off. He can certainly read it. I don't know that we'll have any action on it tonight. Anyone else got a thought on that? Mr. Schaefer's gone through a lot of work to say, put the facts and figures here together for us so that we can go on and begin to formulate a movement in a direction that we would need for the city. If we don't have any objection, I would like for you to go ahead, please, and make your report as requested.
Thank you. About a week ago, we did have a work session, and I listened to lively debate on options and directions that we may proceed to try to look at the police and court facilities. A suggestion was made that the cost needed to be reduced, and we discussed the best ways to reduce cost are first by reducing size, and then secondly by reducing cost per square foot. Those are the two ways that you can adjust budgets on construction projects. Based on that, we also looked at the option of possibly leaving the court facility in this building and the possibility of moving the police facility to the Lampkin and South Jackson Street location. I met with the chief and discussed the possibility of reducing areas in the program, and the building program and the Sally Port, and those areas are represented on this cost estimate that you have. I also met with the mayor, and after discussion with the city engineer, there were ways that the cost per square foot could be reduced by not having to deal with asbestos abatement and by reducing demolition costs that I had in the original cost estimate. The bottom line of those two is represented at the bottom of your page, and the total construction cost would be at about $4.2 million, and with these reductions, and that would not include the cost of land, furniture, or reimbursable expenses.
And in your opinion, with this work that you've done, would satisfy the needs of the current police department?
I believe the original charge was to satisfy the needs assessment by Brinkley Sargent, and I believe that the changes to the program were minimal and would still address the needs assessment, so yes.
And then if we pursue this with a separate police station and with the idea of keeping the courts in the current city hall, what kind of monies did you feel like it would be necessary to have to, say, make some modifications for the courts to, say, use the current police department and what they already have?
We looked in the range of about $100,000 to be able to have the space that the police department currently occupies to have some renovation work done to those to be able to expand the needs for the court administration as per the needs assessment.
So for about $4.3 million, we're looking at, say, providing space for the courts, providing a facility that would satisfy most of the needs of the police department with minus the cost of land.
That's correct.
Okay. Any questions from any of the board members?
Would you say that again? Would you? He just said 4.3, but I think I'm reading something that says 5.1.
No, 5.1 was the initial number that we used for the bond referendum.
I thought we used 9 million.
that this is the construction cost. You would add to that number the land, the furniture, and the reimbursables, and that would have
And
gotten
plus the
you to-
9 million included a brand-new court facility and properties, and we're not suggesting that. We're suggesting that we use the current facility here for the courts. And that's where you come up with that.
I was just trying to get so it's 4.3 million just to build it, but we don't buy the property? I just need a straight number, because I think that's going to be the headline tomorrow. What's the
4.2
number?
million.
4.2 for the police, to build the police.
Does that include,
That's building, site work, contingencies, and fees.
but not land?
Not
purchasing the
land,
property.
not land and not furniture.
So we're right back where we were a year ago.
No, I mean, the reduction already, that's why I think the building cost is a good place to look. The building cost reduction is $900,000, just for the police.
Mr. Schaefer, can I ask a question real quick? You're saying that with these reductions, it does meet the needs assessment study that we approved by Brinkley?
Right, and matter of fact, I highlighted the areas that are in the bold and italicized are what the reductions from this program would represent. Now, the advantage of keeping that Millsaps building is it would allow us to move a lot of those storage areas and the evidence, the car wash areas and exercise areas over into that building. And so that's a tremendous savings as opposed to building them new.
Well, I guess the reason I asked was I saw some of the things you had in bold were reduce the female cell, male holding cell, interview rooms for the attorneys. If we could take those out and still be within the study, then why did we have those additional rooms to begin with?
That's a good question. Those are the cells that are associated with the program of the court need, not the,
Okay.
those with the, in other words, we have 2 female cells in the program. One was dedicated for police holding, and one is dedicated for the court holding. Now, when the programs were together, we had 2 cells. When they're separated, we'd have 1 cell in each location. But by having just the police on that site, the holding facilities, the attorneys, there's no need for attorney interview rooms in the police because that would be associated with the court needs assessment.
Okay, thanks.
How do you go about reducing the cost per square foot of a building?
Well, because the good example, if you look down at the demolition of the existing building, I had it my initial estimate at $266,000, which was $7 per square foot. Now, by reducing that cost of demolition to $50,000, that would reduce the cost per square foot by $6. So in other words,
Your proposal now is building a new police department, keeping the mill cell building in place?
yes.
And you're saying with the cost savings that have been proposed here, the construction cost, not land cost, is estimated at $4.2 million.
That's correct.
So you're saying that to do that, it could be $4.2 million if we were putting it on a site that did not cost anything. We're talking construction cost only.
That's correct.
Okay.
Other questions?
Okay, have you had opportunity to look at the proposal that I made to the workshop?
To the workshop.
We had last week?
What he suggested at the meeting in the building department.
I didn't look at it in depth because, again, I would need to have access to your cost per square foot also to be able to verify or agree or disagree with those numbers. I'd be happy to if you'd like to share those with me.
Well, I think in time.
The passage of time. We have shared your joy at the birth of your children, and proudly we have watched them grow. We've taken care of your healthcare needs during the good times and the not so good. Your parents and grandparents have depended upon us. Together we have shared the struggles and the wonders of life. At Oktibbeha County Hospital, we are celebrating 30 years of being your lifelong choice in healthcare.
Sergeant Brinkley, I believe.
Well, there's a lot of things that changed, Mayor, since we had our first proposal. I'd like to remind you that my proposal was 100% agreed by you 3 weeks ago.
Parts
And
of
now-
it were, yes.
Yes, 100%.
And I think I reminded you in the workshop that you were kind of low in regard to your number there.
I'm still-
And I also
that's
brought
right,
to your
what this
attention
is,
it was not proposing using the current Millsaps building to renovate it for a proposed city hall. And I think you took that upon yourself to do that. And I think at the workshop, I also got into a discussion in regard to what we consider to be 40-year, 50-year construction as well as 100-year construction. Did I not, Mr. Shaper?
Yes.
So yes, there are a lot of things in regard to, say,
I
cost
just
and
want
issues like that.
everybody to know that you was in perfect agreement with me 3 weeks ago that we renovate the Millsap building and build a city
No, I
hall.
think you've injected that on your own. I never indicated of renovating the Millsaps building for a permanent city hall. And I think I told you that. And I told you also it could not be done for the amount of money that you came back in with a suggestion of. Any other questions, Mr. Shaper?
Gary, sticking with the headlines again. The previous proposal for a new police station was 26,319 square feet. Is that correct? That was what we all voted on. That was the
That's
proposal.
correct.
The new proposal, based on what you heard at the work session, is a police station of 22,979 square feet.
That's correct.
Okay. The previous cost was 6.3 million for,
6.4.
6.4 million for the police station. Did that include land and furniture and all that other stuff? Do you have an equivalent figure for people of what that number would be? So that people can at least compare, hey, we have indeed saved. I don't want people to be misled in thinking that we just took out $2 million. If, when we actually do the numbers, we find that we've not saved that much.
The easy number is the construction costs have already come down 900,000. So if you do not change the cost of the land, if you don't change the furniture, and if you don't change the reimbursables, then that 6.4 would be 5.5.
Okay.
So my numbers represent what I have control over as an architect, and you as a board have control over land costs, furniture costs, and reimbursable costs. So that you could affect. I could not affect the size of a toilet stall. That's set.
Understood. The other fact question, if we, for example, choose not to pursue the corner of Jackson and Lampkin, and therefore the Millsaps building is not available because we've moved, it looks like, almost 2,000 square feet of stuff over to that building. If we now choose a different location, do we now need to find a home for all those things that we had planned to move to Millsaps? And so is this cost predicated on the location of Millsaps, even though we didn't include the cost there, if you follow what I'm saying?
That is correct. In other words, the opportunity you have with that site is not to bear the cost of knocking that building down, first, and secondly, move 3,000 square feet of this construction into it for storage, car wash, those things that that building very adequately can do. And you wouldn't have to build a brand-new building, but you do need the storage. You do need to wash and have the evidence. So there is a real cost savings on that piece of land that would not, you're correct, it would not occur if we look at another piece of land.
Okay.
Other questions? from the board.
Gary, have you looked at, and I know that you kind of addressed this with Alderman Mills, but just off the top of your head, and I know, I think that we've talked about this earlier, but some of the factors with the renovation of this building and any potential obstacles that we could face if we were to look at a major renovation of this particular building?
I haven't had a chance to get in that in depth. I did get the drawings from this building, and I have tried to start to match the needs assessment to what this building would resolve. The thing that we would have to look at very closely in the renovation of this building would require you to bring it up to code. You don't have to bring it up to code if we use it the way we're using right now, but as soon as construction would take place, and I would need more time to study the code implications that come along with renovating an existing building. Wouldn't matter whether you used it for the court, for the city hall, for whomever. This building, once it went into a renovation, would be required at a certain point to be brought up to code. And that's not something that we have any control over as a local municipality. That is a federal, that is the code that we have adopted as the city of Starkville. The IBC code requires that to happen. So it was my intention to get into that also, but I didn't have enough time to do that for tonight's presentation.
Gary, I'm going to get a lot of questions about this, so I have to ask you a lot of questions. You had said that you thought you could renovate this building for $100,000 for an expanded court. Would that be preliminary then, based on what you just said, since we haven't?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's, I wanted to couch that in that we would have to look at what the code implications are.
And plus holding facilities, you remember you mentioned that you would have to have, you had planned holding facilities, I believe, one for male and female.
And the last question, Gary, and I think we touched on it, but just to make sure I understand, if the only reductions that we've made to the program, and I'll say only and then you can correct me, are by offsetting, how do we characterize the reductions we've made? We've just moved to the Millsaps building, which we wouldn't have to build new, or are there other actual reductions to the program that your proposal includes?
Well, the about 1,200 square feet of the 3,300 square feet are actual reductions in the program.
Okay.
Okay, and then the remaining would either be housed at the Millsaps building or housed over with the court facilities.
So if, for example, the board chose a different location, we would have to adjust our cost estimate. Let's say we chose a location on 182, because it wouldn't have that Millsaps building, then we couldn't say we've made $900,000 in program reductions. We would have made something considerably less, because we've only reduced the program by 1,200 square feet, if I understood what you said.
No, that 1,200 square feet is not in the Millsaps building, so you reduce that, so you could, to make it easy, 1,200 square feet is out of the program. 1,200 square feet is in the Millsaps building, and the remaining is, would be reduced over here by coming. That's just off the top of my head, but let's say a third to make it easy.
Thank you.
Will you produce those schematic drawings of this courtroom being modified and the police department being modified in this building?
Pardon?
Would you produce those schematic drawings of what this building would look like and the building next across the hall here would look like? If you're gonna make a proposal.
I don't know that the board has directed you to do that, have they?
I don't know the board directed them to do anything.
No, I volunteered
Yeah,
to do
you did.
this. And,
I don't know if the board has directed anybody to do anything right now.
Well, they haven't, but I'm not gonna turn down a free volunteer.
It was certainly the board's request that he.
Request that he, do
He
this.
volunteered to do.
And if you couldn't tell, we thank you.
thank you.
Thank you very much. This brings us to consideration of the Clearwater Consultant proposal to, for $7,400 to look at filling in the Trim Cane and the Sand Creek lagoons for future land proposals. I don't know if Gary Harden is here or not.
Gary.
Yeah, there he is. And it basically, these are basically fees for the study, is that not correct?
That's correct, Mayor. Sampling?
Yeah, sampling and,
And preparation of closure plans for submittal to the
right. And we asked this to be put on here for you to look at. We've got 15 acres in 2 locations here, which one of these locations is located out on Highway 12 coming off the 82 bypass where we have 15 acres there. I had Ms. Spruill to call the city of Philadelphia, in which they had a 5-acre lagoon that was filled there, in which a park facility was used there, and they first had figures of $400,000 and all these exaggerated figures, and they got it done for $20,000. Now I know that our lagoons are 3 times as big as that, but if it offers an economic situation here for us to look at filling these things, it would give us very valuable land to do things with. One could be used even for the firefighting facility we talked about. One would make a good development property to sell. So for we have this on here for us to look at and to consider having the Clearwater consultants to analyze these things and to give us an estimate on what it would cost to, say, to fill these lagoons. And we'd like for you to consider their $7,500 proposal to do this. Potentially, the 15 acres could be worth approximately $1 million to $1.5 million.
Not, of course, based on the $1 million or $1.5 million figure. It's just something that needs really to be looked at. So I would move acceptance of the Clearwater consultant proposal for doing those things necessary to proceed toward the closure of the unused lagoons, as outlined in the proposal here.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion with a second. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Thank you. The second.
Excuse me, just a second.
Go ahead.
Time frame on that estimated to be also best guesstimate.
After the first of the year.
Okay.
About 2 months. The next item you'll see on here is the $20 million to bonds to address our critical infrastructural needs, in which Alderman Davis had someone to call him in his ward. I believe they had the vacuum truck out there to unstop some sewer lines in Green Oaks, and that particular person was very upset because our sewage lines are getting into a dilapidated situation. We also have a situation on Carver Drive in which we have groundwater or stormwater that is getting into the line there that is causing a problem every time we have a rain of 2 inches. We have these types of issues that are happening all over the city. We're also looking at the potential of adding a 16-inch water circulation route to around the Highway 25 bypass. We have a lot of potential construction that will require this in order for us to meet our fire requirements. So we have this out tonight for you to think about it. I think Mr. Mills brought up the fact at our work session that we were going to need something in the neighborhood of $20 million to handle these infrastructural needs, and so I had it put on the agenda tonight just to make you very much aware that you will be hearing more items coming out of the infrastructural committee report in the future.
Exactly, and along those lines, for the members of the press here, there's been no study, no $20 million figure, no nothing on any of this, so this comes out of the air, quoted from the work session. So
It did not come out of the air. It come out from our engineer of the city.
Well, we're not going to get into who said who said.
About where my figures come from. You seem to be got to where you question every figure I put out. But I want to tell you, I do not say $20 million without somebody that's got the ability to come up with that kind of figure. And I resent the fact that you question.
Alderman Mills, my point was, we have seen no study, no listing, no cost estimate, no nothing. Mr. Webb, did you make that report?
I don't recall that, no.
Thank you.
May have in the past and said $20 million would be a good number to work forward, but I have no list totaling that $20 million.
Well, certainly wouldn't take a whole lot to arrive at that figure if you continue to say add the kind of water lines that has been suggested that we need in order to get the volume of water to put fires out. We'll move on to board business.
Hold on, Mr. Mayor, I don't
Yes.
think we're done yet.
I didn't, excuse me, I didn't see you.
I would just, and please excuse me for putting this candy in my mouth. But I would just like to say, if Ms. Rule and Doug, where are you? As many times as I've called them in the last 2 or 3 weeks, I don't know how much it costs. I have no idea how many millions of dollars we need. But the need is real. We have some serious problems, and if you have not experienced raw sewage getting into your house, then you thank God. And we have some people that are experiencing that every time it rains. You heard of people doing the rain dance? Well, I'm doing it now every time it rains to say, God, please stop the rain, because I know my phone is going to start ringing. So I don't know how much it's going to cost, but whatever it is, let's find out and let's start addressing this.
We've had my own personal basement flooded 3 times with raw sewage, and the last time Mrs. Camp was going to sue the mayor. So I refused to go home for several nights. So there is a problem.
Mr. Mayor, I think this discussion highlights something that we need to talk about, and I don't want to step on the infrastructure committee's toes at all, but we have a lot of pressing issues, not just water and sewer, but we have drainage issues, we have street overlay issues, we have several infrastructure repair issues, and we've kind of piecemealed and talked about a little here, a little there, a little whatever. And in my opinion, we need to come up with a comprehensive, consolidated capital improvement plan where we prioritize these things, understanding that we do have a lot of work, some more pressing than others. Identify a cost figure, an accurate cost figure for all of it, and start identifying ways in which we can start planning and phasing these things in, because as we address our immediate needs over time, those things that were further down our list will become immediate needs. And if we don't start planning and taking care of this, I mean, we're talking about this with water right now, as far as along the bypass and installing water lines, and, we run into a situation where, oh my goodness, USDA is building a building that's going to cost us an extra so much money. And I think it's time that we take all of these issues, whether it's fire flow protection, sewer, streets, and we come up with a consolidated capital improvement plan that we can work on and identify and work on as we go, and understand that that's going to be a continuous list. We're never really going to ever get done with it and move in that direction. But thank you for putting the eye-popping $20 million bond issue on the agenda. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else? We'll move on to board business, consideration of adoption of a city policy on the use of crosswalks and speed tables. Bill, I believe that's your baby.
Thank you, Mayor. Board, in your packet, I hope, is the copy of the policy for speed table installation as well as crosswalk installation. I was asked to bring these to your attention and for your consideration on both the speed tables as well as the crosswalks. The speed tables, again, are an attempt to slow traffic down without the use of police officers sitting there or without the four-way stops that we have been doing. It is aimed at low trafficked residential areas that, of course, have children playing and whatnot. But the guidelines that we have in front of you for the speed table would give us a mechanism to either permit or not to permit this particular type device in residential areas, meeting the requirements that they have to meet to be considered as a speed deterrent. These actually are a raised, and when I say table, they are a raised asphalt surface, about 3.5, 4 inches above the existing pavement that you slope up to the 3.5 and you go 10 or 12 feet at that level and then slope down. So there's not the bone jarring thump of a speed bump, but you actually will go up and then you'll go back down after about 12 feet. They have been found to work in other cities throughout the nation, and this one actually is taken from some of the ordinances that we put together that are having good luck with it. It is like I said, you have to meet certain requirements. It has to be so far from drainage structures, so far from fire hydrants. You have to have a speed limit of 30 miles per hour, so it can't be on a real speed. Of course, we wouldn't have a residential street with a speed limit over 30 miles an hour anyway. It's got to have a traffic volume of less than 5,000 cars per day, which means it would be a low-use residential area. This requires 80% of the neighbors involved in it, or on that block, or in a certain length from that speed table, or the proposed location of it. They have to approve it. They have to, we actually send out a memo or a circular, and they have to support it. And they have to send it back and support it. Now, the ones that I've been looking at, they require, as part of the installation procedure, the neighborhood to buy into this by actually paying for the speed bump or speed table that they're requesting. Of course, that's optional based on what you want to do. And it requires, as again, 80% of the homes surveyed to indicate support of it before we'll actually put it out there. Then if a year or two down the road they decide they don't want it, it takes the same 80% to remove it. Basically, it would give us an option when we all the time getting requests for slow children at play signs or some mechanism to slow traffic down in these residential areas. This would give us one that has been tried and proven to be successful. By the way, it's not recommended for a primary route for emergency vehicles, and both the fire and police department would be consulted and have veto power over it if it was deemed to not be in the best interest of that particular road for their emergency vehicles. Has anybody got any questions on that one? Okay. The other one is a safety and crosswalk installation guidelines. Now, you already realize that at every four-way stop and every street that has an intersection with a traffic signal, we have crosswalks. They're painted there. There's a standard procedure to do that. Basically, this document will give us a procedure to go about putting a crosswalk or determining the need for a crosswalk in areas that do not have a controlled intersection. In other words, if you're going down a street and there's a side street coming into it that they stop over there, but the main street does not stop, and there's a lot of requirement for cross-traffic going across that main street, this would give us the wherewithal to decide and place those at those intersections that otherwise are not controlled by a stop sign or a street light or any type of mechanism that would slow the traffic down or stop it. An example of this particular uncontrolled intersection is what the uncontrolled crosswalk would be down on University Drive there at Maxwell Street, where I think we had somebody back a couple of months ago came up, and there was a lot of cross traffic across University Drive, and there's no stop signs or stop lights or anything from Nash Street all the way to the University. So everywhere you have a street coming into it that somebody would walk down that street and want to cross University Drive, it's an uncontrolled intersection as far as crosswalks are concerned. So you just can't go out there and stick a crosswalk and expect everybody to stop when they're walking across there, because they're used to going down there at whatever speed they go. This would give us a mechanism to determine if, in fact, there is a need for a crosswalk there. And then once that is determined, it would tell us exactly how to go about putting it there. And this, again, is done with a study from the Federal Highway Administration, and it is working in other parts of the country. And it has a lot of pages on it because it deals with the different speeds, the sight distances required, and there's a lot of functions that go into how you place where you can place a safe crosswalk, rather than just popping there because there's a need. You've got to have sight distance to make sure that people will be able to stop in time once they see the advanced warning sign telling of the crosswalk. This will give us some mechanism to go out and look and determine if, yes, this is a place we need one, the need is there, or no, it's not, or it will give us some definitive measures to answer these questions when they come up.
Questions from board members?
Talking crosswalks, Bill, last time I had a couple of places, you told me they didn't apply on the speed table. On the crosswalk, one of the biggest areas on our side of town is right at the side of school, right on North Montgomery. If you live on Margaretta and on that side of the street, people literally drive because the street's so busy and so dangerous. Are you familiar with that area?
Yes, I am.
Would this be an area that a crosswalk would be considered, and this would be something that
Would be down at Greenfield or Green Street, whatever, that goes up to...
Right where it turns into Sudeth, right off of North Montgomery.
I would say that offhand it would be. We'd have to check the stop and sight distance going north. But I think there's a large enough hill there that you'd have plenty of sight distance down there, yeah.
And then what does it actually look like from a car standpoint if does it look just like a regular traffic light that only gets switched if someone hits the crosswalk button?
Well, it would depend on which type of crosswalk you put. Now, of course, the safest one would be an actual stop signal, a stop light there that would be pedestrian activated. But you can put some with a flashing light up and then advance warning signs to say that there's a stop pedestrian and crosswalk. It has a lot of factors into it, and that's why this thing is a little thicker than the other one, is because there's a lot more things that you have to consider before you pick which solution you're going to take.
And then the payment question. On the speed table, we were having the neighborhood pay for that speed table. How about on the crosswalk?
The crosswalks, we don't have any mechanism because we know there's no definitive number of people involved that we know of that would benefit by it. It's just on a speed table, you're on a certain street, and those people are the ones that are being affected or trying to slow the traffic down, and we know where they are. But when you start generating enough foot traffic, like you got a school there, you got people coming from all kinds of neighborhoods that would be there, and there's no way that I could well, I hadn't even thought about it, but I don't know how you would nail down who to charge other than just charge the general city.
So that would be something that we might decide. It may be generated by the neighborhood or even the school board, but it'd be something that we determine a need from a public safety standpoint, and we'd fund that.
Exactly.
Where we normally fund things like that. Okay.
And it seems to me that that same principle ought to apply also to the speed table type of thing. If the city is responsible for public safety and we determine, even at the request of a neighborhood or after they say we've got a speeding problem here, we determine something should be done, that's something it seems to me that the city needs to tend to just the same as if they were tending to crosswalks or something.
Well,
If you get into a situation where you're looking at a 20 plus percent veto of things, to me, and plus the paying of things, to me, the issue is public safety. Is something needed or is it not needed? And it's the city's responsibility to provide that public safety.
I would agree up to the point that if we, not just my opinion, but if we instigate this speed table policy and the city pays for it, every street in town that's just strictly residential is gonna have a speeding problem.
But see, the city, as it always has, determines if it thinks there are sufficient causes to warrant a sign or a stop sign or a slow sign or this kind of sign. We do
But we
thing.
don't have a very good history of turning anybody down if they come up and say, everybody's speeding up and down my street. We need a four-way stop. It's been my experience that if the neighborhood comes up here, we'll do whatever they tell them. I mean, it's up to you if you want to do it, but I think you're going to have a lot more people asking for speed tables than there are for a crosswalk.
Right, and then the city has to make a determination if the public safety really warrants that. I have no problem with the speed table idea, other than requiring a certain percentage to approve it. If there's a public safety issue that needs to be done, it needs to be done.
Right, then I would
If it needs
request-
to be done, then it doesn't need to be paid for by the.
I agree with that, and if that's the case, I would suggest that you don't do anything with the speed table one tonight, because if we're going to determine, the city's going to determine if there's a need out there, then we need to go back and come up with the criteria for determining that need. Whereas this one is pretty much, we're taking their word for it, that there's a speeding problem, and they're buying into it with their money and their support. If we're not going to do that, then we need to have a criteria for determining it.
Well, all these years, if we get a request like that, the police department may check the street, they may set a patrol car there, we may end up putting a sign. It all seems to have worked. I would concur we might ought to hold the speed table thing. I have no problem with the crosswalk proposal.
Then would you make a motion that we accept the crosswalk?
I'll be happy to, Mayor.
Thank you.
If the motion is to adopt the proposed city policy for installation of crosswalks, then I would so do it.
And I would second that. Mr. Attorney, do you think this is something that needs to be an ordinance as opposed to just a policy?
Well, I think that,
Of course, on one hand, let me take it a step further. I do not recall there are no penalties of any sort or anything in here because it didn't really have any bearing.
Mhm.
Is that not
You
correct?
mean for not,
For something, they're not penalties or violations or anything, so in that case, it might not need to be done by ordinance.
well, there certainly should be some penalties for violating the law as far as running through these things, but I didn't feel like that was my obligation to come up with
This
a
is
penalty.
safety and installation might need to be some sort of separate ordinance for violation of that type of
right,
thing.
if it's going to be the policy of the board to install penalties for violations, then it definitely needs to be in the ordinance, at least with the penalties and the violations of it, at a minimum.
And if you're gonna do crosswalks, but you're not gonna enforce them, it seems a little strange. That, the crosswalk policy could be adopted, and then followed with an ordinance establishing the usual maximum, up to the maximum penalty the state law allows for municipalities if we think that is necessary.
I can reference the policy that the board approves.
I was trying to deal, and we're on the same wavelength with the situation of really, should this be an ordinance with penalties, or can we have just a policy followed by an ordinance for violation of?
Either one of those would work. But we definitely need an ordinance regarding the penalties.
That would be.
Of course, the shortest and so forth type of thing would be this as a policy.
If it's,
Though, of course, repeated in the minutes and so forth, and then with an ordinance addressing any violation of that policy.
if it's done as a policy, it'd be easier to tweak if we need to, would it not? Than an ordinance.
That it would, in terms of just amendment on a basis by the board, as opposed to having to do an amendment to an ordinance.
Right.
That certainly is the situation.
All right, so we have a motion to adopt the policy of the crosswalks, and we have a motion with a second.
Why don't we add to that, and to direct the city attorney to draw up the appropriate ordinance for any violation of the crosswalk guidelines.
That's part of your motion, and drawing up a ordinance and violation of the.
Dealing with violations of the crosswalk policy of the city. Can you agree with that?
Absolutely.
We have a motion and a second. All of you have heard the discussion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. So we have adopted the policy of the crosswalks.
And we're gonna hold the
Speed
thing for a little more discussion and thought.
We added on this the consideration of a personnel policy to define the pay rate and adjustment practices within the city. At the last board meeting, you instructed us to bring this back at the last regular board meeting. We since had a board meeting, which many of you were not there, in which it was, motion was made that this be turned over to a committee with.
That wasn't a motion, Mr. Mayor.
That it not be turned over to a committee?
The motion was to direct the personnel director to specifically get with Alderman Cox, McLaurin, and Perkins, individually or as a group, to address concerns they may or may not have about this policy, with any other alderman being able to express concern to him as well.
All right, and have you had an opportunity to get with these three particular individuals yet at this time? Well, it was kind of a fast board meeting in which that may be my fault, because I didn't quite understand that you wanted, I was under the impression we had turned this over, created a new committee for this to be studied. My apologies.
Sidestepped all that.
I see.
Remember.
So it would be, again, at that particular shortened board meeting, it was a request that you get with the three individuals who had great questions about this particular issue and see if we could not get something ironed out. One of those individuals has been very busy campaigning, so I think he probably would not have been readily available. We're down to a report from the Budget Committee. Matt, was it not the Department of the City Clerk, item number 3 that you were asking as part of that as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And we'll take that as our first order of business. The Budget Committee, which is Alderwoman Self, Alderman Mills, and myself, we met earlier, and we reviewed a final budget amendment for the fiscal year that closed September 30th. And there are some housekeeping issues that demand our attention, and thus the budget amendment that Ms. Clark prepared for us. And I will say in general that there is some good news here. The good news is that we earned about $400,000 in additional sales tax revenue than we had budgeted in that fiscal year. But don't try to spend that, because the bad news is that gas, utilities, and care for prisoners, those cost almost every single penny of that good sales tax news. And as part of this amendment, this budget amendment is to reflect those changes. Many of those you'll see are primarily accounting issues where we received a grant that was larger, and so there's an offsetting revenue to an offsetting expense. But this is something that we'll need to attend to this evening to finalize out the accounting for that year.
It is a housekeeping amendment
Yes,
that
sir.
needs to be done. I move approval of the final budget amendment for fiscal year 2005-6 as stated on the amendment copy we have with the final figures, an amended amount of revenue, $572,765, and likewise amended amount of total expenses, and we're talking general fund, $572,765, and then the corresponding amendments to either income expense or both on other selected funds.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
And just one other item under a report from the Budget Committee, we did start the internal and external salary review, which we've been talking about since the end of the budget process, and I know all of y'all are very interested in this, and Mr. Greer did a terrific amount of work to present some data for us. This will be a months-long process, and so we just wanted to introduce it tonight, and of course, we'll be seeking your feedback throughout that process. We did have some initial thoughts that we wanted to share with y'all. One, we were establishing a peer group of Tupelo, Oxford, and Columbus for us to consider our municipal salaries in comparison to. Secondly, that we talked as an initial thought that we would want to have our City of Starkville salaries, we'd like to get to that peer group average. And then third, that any adjustments we would prioritize for our lowest paid employees, those entry-level employees. And we even considered having a new minimum salary for city employees, and we talked a lot about livable wages. But it's also an issue of being competitive, especially in those entry-level, low-level wages. That's where we're seeing our highest turnover, and it's something that we're wanting to address as quickly as we can. But this is just the start, and we'll keep you informed, and we'll potentially have work sessions together to work through this, because obviously this involves all of us.
Just as a comment or suggestion, on the lower end of the salary scale, a localized pool is good, I think, because that's probably where you're going to draw from. But as y'all start looking at the moving up and moving at the positions which require certifications, whether it be a lineman in the electric department or certain levels of police officers, firefighters, whatever, we may want to expand that group to include other municipalities around the state as well, rather than limit ourselves to just those three mentioned.
That's a good point. Will do. That's it from the Budget Committee.
Give us one more thing on here, the report of the Sturgis Bike Rally. I think you were going to be, talk quickly on that. We'll take a break out of this.
Just very quickly, I know that there had been some concern that the bike rally route, this past bike rally, was on the bypass as opposed to Highway 12. And I know a lot of us enjoy watching the bike rally, and of course it's an opportunity for thousands of people to visit our city and enjoy our restaurants, et cetera. And we felt like that pointed to a need for greater and more formal communication between the City of Starkville and the Sturgis Bike Rally. So Captain Chris Thomas and the Police Department, CAO Lynn Spruill, and myself met with the Mayor of Sturgis and the leaders of the bike rally to start that conversation. It was a meeting that was facilitated by the Greater Starkville Development Partnership with Armadillo Cruise, and we even had a person from the Village Cycle Center. And one of the things that came out of it, of course, was that desire for us to be even more formally connected, because this is such an important event for our region. But that the bike rally would, we would have them come to the board, much like we do the Cotton District Arts Festival and other groups, so that we had a very formal commitment of city resources, and we all understood where that was. And I just thought that was good news, and certainly appreciated Captain Thomas and Ms. Spruill for participating in that and leading the city's efforts.
Thank you. We'll take a short break here at recess.
You don't want to go ahead and handle the park commission stuff since they're all here?
I can't hear you.
Do you want to handle the park commission stuff right now, since the bond thing, since they're all here, before we recess?
We could do that.
I mean, it shouldn't take long, should it?
Shouldn't. Consideration or authorization to issue revenue or general obligation bonds for the purpose of constructing a multipurpose facility for the Sportsplex complex as recommended by the Park Commission.
I'm passing out to you a architectural rendition of what our hopes are for this building to be. It was not included in your packet with my other information because I did not go to Mr. Schaefer until Thursday to make this addition. And he graciously gave up some of his weekend so that we would have that picture. I know I have two Park Commission members here that are going to interject some things to you, but quickly I'd just like to say that we know that this isn't a new thing. From the very beginning, when the park was built, the indoor facility was a part of those plans and a part of that long range, or short range at that time. But it was cut down for financial purposes, but it had always, from that point on, was always a top priority if and when we got to the next stage, that it would be the next large addition to the park. At which time we did surveys with other organizations, SBA, SYSO, asking what they thought future things they needed and how they what they considered about the indoor facility. All of which gave us their list of things they wanted and confirmation to the fact that this was the building that needed to be the next phase. So we at that time, as we approached the retire, as the first 2% came to an end and we rolled the next 2% over, which we were graciously given our 40% again, we decided to pursue this building. And we took those steps to retire the old bond early in the intent to get a new bond to front the money to build this facility. We also at that time advertised for an architect. We screened architects. We decided on an architect, Mr. Schaefer. And we sat down and had numerous meetings with him in the last year, since last spring, on what would go in this building, what the cost variations would be to the things that went in this building, and how this thing would fall down. And we have approached all those things, and I put in your packet a little version of all the different things that could be used in a multi-purpose building, from basketball to volleyball to the track, the stage, the multi-purpose floor that can be used to save the surface of the basketball court and put tables and chairs and banquet facilities and what have you in there. And we have come up to the point where we have done everything we need to do to approach this building, to make this building a reality. And now we would be here to let us continue on and let Mr. Moreland and Ms. Isaac.
You tell how much we want to burn there.
Oh, well, you may notice that originally, we even brought in Mr. Schaefer, by the way. You have seen his PowerPoint version and his computer-generated version of what that building would be looking like and how it would look when he came in here and showed it to you last spring. At that time, we were considering a $4 million project. At this time, we're asking for $5 million because, naturally, the rising cost, which is a very good point at this time that we need to stress that the longer we put this building off, the more this building will cost. So I just want to note that we're asking for $5 million. We want to pay for it out of the new 2% money that we will be accruing over the next several years. We will have to take into consideration that the park improvements will have to also come out of that fund. And we just want to set something up that can get this thing started if possible. And I'll let Ms. Isaac and Mr. Moreland go on from there.
Well, we've been working on this thing for a year and a half, 2 years, and we interviewed, like Clark said, all the architects and all, and not saying it just because Mr. Schaefer's here, because if he wasn't here, I'd probably say something better about him, but he was far ahead of the rest of them. It wasn't even in the picture. I mean, he was, I don't know who he got to do it for him, but it was great. Our main thing is we've got enough money with the 2% to retire the bond after we get the bond. We need to get started on it. We would like to be turning dirt by at least June. The longer we wait, the less building we're gonna have for the same amount of money. We take in, our part of the 2% is
40%.
about 40% would add up to plenty of money to cover the thing, provided y'all don't dip into our kitty again like we had one time before. But this is not just for kids, it's for everybody. McDonald's has been getting a bad slam about kids gaining weight and Mississippi being the fattest state in the country and all this kind of stuff. That's not the problem. The problem is we don't have stuff for kids to do anymore. I didn't have to go to the gym to exercise when I was growing up because I plowed a mule all day. And if you'd made me go to the gym when that mule was over with, you'd had a heck of a fight on your hand. But kids don't do that now. We've got to give them something to do. And this gym is a good thing. We've got a walking track for elderly people. We're moving the thing. Mr. Schaefer and I was not really that hot on the thing to start with because I thought we was going to take enough people, more people to probably double our staff to run it, but we're not because we're joining the two buildings together. We're going to run it in the daytime with our present staff. Depending on how late we keep it open at night, we'll need extra help for that, but we will not need it during the daytime, which will not improve our budget, that much for our personnel. Plus, if we get tight for money, we just cut Clark's salary some.
Again.
But what we'd like to do tonight is see if y'all would pass the bond deal, and then we need to get it moving as fast as we can because the longer we wait, the less building we're going to have for the same amount of money.
Sounds like a broken record that many of us have heard the same thing around here.
Questions?
But the difference in what we've got here and what we've been hearing tonight is our money's already there. And y'all scratching for money.
One thing, PC, Dorothy, you have anything you want to interject? Okay.
Do we have a cost estimate for the building yet?
Mr. Schaefer,
Mr.
what
Schaefer.
have we got that I've seen? Let me explain to you what we did. We took a Cadillac version over here, thinking we're going to settle for somewhere in the middle. So we want to see what we can do with $5 million, and then we may have to cut down a lot. We may can add some more stuff. We've got it in stages that we can do later if we have to, but the cost will depend on how far along. We need extra parking, which is a good thing to have. You need, if you don't need extra parking, you're hurting anyway, no matter where you're in business or what. But the cost is, we run down in a little renovation to the building that we in to tie on to the building that we're planning on building. And we figure that the $5 million, of course, we can't go any further till we get the bonds. Till we get approval for the bonds. Then we can get a firm price on what we can do within that structure.
I know we're in a rush to do a lot of things, and I may ask for 2 weeks just to answer that question, kind of how much does a building cost? The one thing, the numbers that we talked about, if we just earned a little over $1 million in 2% tax, and if the Park and Rec receives 40% of that $1 million, that comes to a little over $400,000 a year. If I do $5 million divided by 10 years, principal and interest would be about $525,000 a year. So I see a discrepancy between what's coming in and what would be going out. But there must be an answer to that already.
We put 10 years down there because we just was going to put something down there. But that's a negotiable thing. We could go to 15. We could lower the money some. We could extend the year some. We're looking for a doable package with some flexibility.
The amount of money that we're asking for, our 2% right now, with the way everything is growing, is going to far exceed that in 5-6 years. You will not have any problem with the money on this. But like I said, the longer we wait, the more it's gonna be.
And see, my question was gonna follow, has anybody actually run the calculations on debt service over a period of time? The 10 years puzzled me, because I didn't see how the revenue would be there to do a 10-year issue. Normally you get your project, you cost your project, then you issue bonds. We, of course, can't issue bonds tonight anyway because of the formal process. Yes, we can authorize or express our intent to proceed with the project, pending some
But what we're
additional
trying to
information.
do is know how much money we've got that we can spend. We may not spend it all, but we've got to know the maximum figure, so we'll know what part of that Cadillac we can build and what part of it's got to be a Volkswagen. 10 years is the figure that we just put down because that's when the bond would be. It could be 12 years, 15 years, whatever,
need to
but
be a
we
20
need.
year.
Yeah.
It could be 20 years, but you don't want to gamble, but the way they're building, the way the retail industry is growing around here and the restaurants and everything, that 20%, 2% will far exceed this bill before long.
I completely support the project. We just don't seem to really yet have the information we need to proceed with a bond issue.
I agree with that, but
See,
we
normally
can't
you
go
don't-
and spend more money to Mr. Schaefer and all till we know we can do the project.
He's not volunteering anything on this.
I think y'all got all of his previous.
Y'all got all of this.
But it's a flexible thing on the years, somewhat on the money, and a lot on what we can put in there, take out of there, much like we did in the original one when we took the indoor facility out from the beginning and the track and stuff and parking. But we just need to negotiate a middle ground there and get the go-ahead to try to finalize those plans to get started.
I think what I'm hearing here to the board members is that they would like more information with regard to the financial aspect of it. Also in regard to what you're gonna get for what you're talking about. And I understand where you're coming from. You don't know that yet, but you got some idea that this thing looks big enough for a police station, a city hall, and everything else. If that little building out on the side's the existing building.
Yes, it is.
Am I not right, gentlemen, about what you're?
Yes, it sort of looks like we reached up and we pulled a $5 million figure out of the air, and we said, well, we're gonna get whatever we can get for $5 million, which to me is sort of the horse and the cart in different things. Looks
Not
like
when
you
you're
would-
dealing with government or city or state business. If I was building this for myself, then I would know what I could do. I would know how much money I could spend. But right now, we don't know how much we can spend, so we don't want to go obligate ourselves for architectural fees to a dead project.
But see, over a year ago, we looked at the presentation that was made on this is exactly what we want and so forth. Has any of that want list changed?
No, it hadn't changed.
It was only $4.1 million then, and now we're looking at $5 million.
But
Am
you
I
still
right?
talking about the same building. From a year difference, you talking about the same building for the
But it looks like we
4.3
can get a
versus
cost
5.
estimate for that building. That affects the length of the bonds, the amount
I
of the
agree with
bonds,
that.
all those kind of things.
I agree with that. But we still, like Clark said, we can put the difference in, this was just figures we put down for the years and the amount. We can play that any way we need to make the principal and interest work out for what we need to do. If we need it for 12 years, we need it for 15. In my opinion, we could pay the thing off in 8 with the I wouldn't want to stay that,
Well,
but I'm talking about with the increase in 2% money. If you look at your sheet, the 2% money has gone up from 8 to 15% every year, all the way
I
through.
understand
And it will
that.
continue to do that.
and we certainly hope that it will. The board, if it were of a mind, could certainly indicate support for the project, authorize the Park Commission to utilize 2% money for the preliminary architectural fees. All of this pending receipt of more information. see, you can't determine a bond issue, the amount, or for
I
how
agree.
long.
I agree with that.
Until you know what your project's gonna cost.
But we don't want to go any further spending money till we know we can build it.
You know, there's no way you can get an answer like that till you see what the project is gonna cost that you want, and whether or not the money available will service the bonds. And if so, over how long a period of time?
We will make the building fit the money.
We do have many options.
We've got a lot of options that we can do. And in fact, every time we've had a meeting, we've talked about.
The passage of time. We have shared your joy at the birth of your children, and proudly we have watched them grow. We've taken care of your health care needs during the good times and the not so good. Your parents and grandparents have depended upon us. Together we have shared the struggles and the wonders of life. At Oktibbeha County Hospital, we are celebrating 30 years of being your lifelong choice in healthcare.
Possibly the tract.
So really what you're saying is you want to do what you can do for $5 million.
Exactly.
Whatever that is.
Exactly.
Gary?
They did generate a program. We did do a cost estimate, and the cost estimate for their program was $4 million, essentially. That was pre-Katrina, and it has been our experience that in this amount of time, costs have increased about 25%. And so that's how the $4 million went to $5 million. Their program did not change. The construction environment changed.
And I understand that logic, yes. So we're thinking that
So
if
we
the
have
program could be done.
Yeah, we had a cost. We didn't just pull that figure out of there. We had that, the 4.3, 4.1 to start with.
But then
and then as the cost went up and the Katrina deal went up and the building cost went up,
that's where the
five come into it.
Estimate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
But basically, you know, we've pushed it to the furthest point we can push it. You understand what I'm saying? And if it's going to go further, we need your approval and/or guidance and/or suggestions,
How
whatever.
about we hold this to the next meeting, get an actual cost estimate in front of us in terms of what we think has happened to the cost for the program. Also get the figures run on what sort of debt service over how many years would be required to service that particular debt of the issuer of the bond.
We can do that.
Could we also go the next step then, and once we get those numbers generated, also authorize bond counsel to start drafting appropriate paperwork based upon the numbers that will be generated, so those can come back at the next meeting as well?
So the paperwork can come back?
The initial paperwork?
That means we're gonna have to see all this stuff ahead of time.
Okay.
Or have it for December the 1st meeting after we get this in a week or two? Get these figures?
I understand.
See, bond counsel's gonna need to be told how much.
How much and how long.
What.
Well, and I thought that was what the figures they were generating was to bring back to us, and then we then turn around and authorize bond counsel to start the first initial process. So what I was saying is while they were generating those numbers, also send them to bond counsel to answer those very questions and start with that paperwork.
We certainly could.
Just a
You know,
suggestion.
I'd like to see the payback numbers, the debt service estimates first.
On the $5 million?
That's what you're talking about, yeah.
Okay, we can do that. We can have it to you tomorrow.
Doesn't shock me, I can run it tomorrow.
We'll have it to you. We'll have it to you tomorrow.
Any further questions? Thank you.
Okay.
We'll now take a short break. We'll pick up a consideration to transfer the code compliance young lady. This brings us down to item F, consideration for the transfer of the code compliance officer and the code compliance clerk position from the building department, planning department to the police department. And Mr. Favors asked that we put this on, in the executive session of this agenda for further discussion? Anyone have any questions or anything about that? If not, we'll move on to item H. That's the Infrastructure Committee report. Kind of bring us up to date on where they are.
Simply with regard to that, we have been discussing off and on the requirements relative to fire flows and engineering considerations there. We have a number of pieces of information that we need to pin down definitively. I hope after today's election, our committee member, Alderman Perkins, will be able to attend the meetings of the committee, so we will start scheduling committee meetings in the very near future. So that's all to report tonight.
Okay. Brings us down to airport.
Let's see if we can do some consent agenda items with everybody's concurrence. Let's take a look at this. I would recommend that we move both airport items, which are routine payments, pay requests for various projects, to a consent agenda. Those two items. Let's consider moving the electric department D1, 2, the police department F1 and 2, public services G, two, but I wanted to look at we have those bid results, do we not? That's, I think they're, there. So G2, and 6, all of those items to a consent agenda. And unless anyone has other items you'd like to move, or I'll make a motion.
I'd like to pull the
certainly.
F2, because that grant sounded really exciting, and I thought the chief might want to share that with us and toot his own horn a little bit.
Could,
all right, we will pull F2 for horn tooting.
could we think about it? Did you list number 3 under the electric department, which is also requesting authorization to advertise for bid? Did you?
Wait a minute, I'm sorry, I turned 2 pages at the same time. Thank you. Let's go back to electric department 1, 2,
3,
and 4.
All right.
All those items.
Could we also?
Under personnel, E1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. To the, and 7. Let's see, that was added on here.
Right.
Just a second, let me flip these pages.
With the actual, with the actual hirings, with the stipulation of the appropriate.
When you're finished.
Okay. It's been suggested that we add to the consent agenda airport 1 and 2. In the electric department, item 1, 2, 3, 4. Under personnel, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Police, 1. Public services, 2 and 6 have been recommended, and I assume a motion made that we put these on a consent agenda.
And I would move that these items enumerated be moved to a consent agenda and would move their approval. And of course, Tammy, for minute purposes on the, we'll
Standard
itemize the
boring.
bids on the boring work, and it would be the low bid and so forth.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor that we add these particular items just mentioned be added to consent agenda, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Okay, thank you. The first thing that comes up is Building Codes Planning Department. It has been requested that the final plat approval of the Western Crossing as recommended by Planning and Zoning Commission be approved. Mr. Brent, I think you're here. Do you not represent these folks? He's here. If you have any questions that you need to ask. Type of property is commercial, commercial, commercial. To the west is residential. And I think that in your package you have a final plat. It has been approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission for final approval. Is that not correct?
Millsap's car dealership is named in, I don't remember the number, more of those cars, just so everybody know where we're talking about. West side of Highway 25 bypass.
Millsap's in Lot 6 as it's enumerated here. Or parcel 6.
Any questions by any of the board members?
If there's no questions, Mr. Mayor, I'd move approval.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion with a second that we approve this plat of the Western Crossing as recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Thank you.
Hold on, so the minutes should reflect also that the appropriate bond has been posted in this development. Although the paving has been completed, usually we wait for the 80%. The paving's been completed, but according to Mr. Webb, and I've reviewed the letter, Mr. Brent's familiar with it, that we have the appropriate bond amount posted for any repairs that might need to be made once the final construction is completed. And we've got a revolving letter that extends at least a year and extends another year, and then we can extend it if it becomes necessary. So I want the record to reflect. Right.
Okay. Office of City Clerk.
Oh, and in the future, it would be good if in our packets we could have information related to that, so we would not have to do that on the bonds and so forth, as applicable.
Good evening. My first item I have is the claims docket for November 3rd. And with all the policy and procedures of the city is being followed, I recommend that the board approve the claims docket unless there are some questions.
Move approval of the claims docket for claims through November 2nd, 2006.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion with a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Your second item, please.
The second item is just a report of expenditures. If you see in your packet, there are the expenditures for the month of September. And just the report that needs to be accepted.
Do we have a motion to accept the?
We accept the report of receipts and expenditures for the period ending September 30th, 2006.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Item number 4 here, number 3 has already been done.
Item number 4 is the municipal compliance questionnaire that has to be submitted to the state auditor's office. And I am recommending that the board accept the municipal compliance questionnaire and authorize its submission to the state auditor's office.
Marquita, there were 2 no's in the audit itself, and one of them was this: has the municipality conducted an annual land sale for delinquent ad valorem taxes Why is that a no? Because I thought we were doing that annually, so maybe I
Well-
didn't understand the question.
Well, we wouldn't have to have one because we've moved the taxes to the county.
To the county. So that'll always be a no. And then the next one was the minutes within 30 days, and that's something we're continuing to work on.
Right.
So it doesn't always have to have yeses, it can be nos.
That's correct.
All right.
If I were doing it, I would put a clarifying note down there about the tax sale thing as to why.
Okay, I can, if it's the board pleasure, just put a little notation on there why that is a no.
Mayor, I move that we approve the municipal compliance questionnaire with the change noted by Mr. McCoy.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Let's see, how many do we have now? There are four ayes and 2 nays.
Maybe we need to, I'm an aye.
Okay, well, let's hold, show of hands, please. All those in favor? All those opposed? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
The electric department is all consent. The police department is consent. Personnel is all consent. Right, I'm gonna bring that up. Item 2, the police department, requests RSA to apply for and enter into agreement with the office of, Chief, toot your horn.
Thank you. We were fortunate enough to be contacted by the state highway safety program to see if we would pilot and coordinate a DUI enforcement project grant that covers not only our area, but one of our officers, Sergeant Sean Word, is going to actually be the coordinator for this whole geographical area. And we feel like it'll not only have an impact on the number of DUI violators that we have, hopefully by reduction, but it'll also mean a 100% match locally for our department for $35,000. And this will help tremendously in overtime and our enforcement effort. And as y'all recall, we approved 2 traffic DUI officers for an expansion of the force here just almost a month ago. And we anticipate that a large portion of this grant money will be utilized in DUI roadblocks. And we hope that we'll be able to reduce the frequency of drinking and driving and alcohol violations where we don't have to suffer through a situation that happened at Ole Miss or something of any similar nature. And we think this will help us improve public safety, and we appreciate the state giving us this opportunity to give us this money and afford us this chance.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Do we have a motion to request authorization?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
With the mayor being authorized to execute the grant agreement on behalf of the city.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed. Public Services. Glad to see you so prompt getting up to the front tonight.
Keep this thing rolling. First item, you may recall back in September, I think it was the meeting where we're ratifying the budget for the next year. I'd requested and been granted approval to add a secretarial position to the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund. My intent at the time being that I would take a person who was holding a secretarial position within public services but serving other departments and train and develop that person for possible future promotion, taking on more responsibilities. So, but as you recall at the meeting, the decision was made that this person would be reassigned to the department to which she provides the most support. So, and I was given approval to advertise, advertise on the outside for the position. When it came time to write up the qualifications and desired qualifications and knowledge and skills for the position, for the purpose of advertising in the paper, I
ran that by Mr. Greer to go ahead and make sure that we have it slotted in the proper place. After his review, he just determined that, what I was asking for and looking for best fit into administrative assistant position and not that of a secretarial position. So the purpose of my request tonight is to, change my request from a secretarial position and advertise to fill an administrative assistant position.
Questions? Go ahead.
Mr. Greer or Ms. Spruill or whoever, have pretty much all so-called secretarial positions within the city been reclassified to administrative assistant?
No, there's still, I don't know off the top of my head, there's 2 or 3 or 4 that are still classified as secretary, and there are several that are classified as administrative assistants. The duties that Doug vote up for this position fell more appropriately within the administrative assistant.
Other questions? Do we have a motion to consider a reclassification?
Mayor and Board, I'd be willing.
Rich, excuse me just a second. What did we end up doing in sanitation? Somebody refresh me.
Ms. Southward was reassigned to the sanitation department as a secretary.
With job duties of continuing taking over, speak for him, speak department, and until we can find someone with landscape. She has lots of things also.
That's your question. Not really.
By the way, Doug, you're requesting that we not only reclassify the position, but also authorize to advertise to fill that position.
Right, yeah.
Where are you gonna house this person?
That remains to be determined.
Would you say we're running out of space at City Hall?
Yes, I would.
Do we have a motion that we approve his request?
Mayor and Board, I move that we reclassify the position previously secretary to administrative assistant. We advertise grade 8, step 4 pay raise with the appropriate probationary time.
We have a motion and a second. I think y'all heard some discussion on this. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Your
Thank
next
you.
item.
The next item that wasn't put on consent was requesting approval of the sub-grant agreement with the Department of Health for mosquito control activities in 2007. And this is the document that needs to be signed by the authority representing the board. And the grant amount is for $44,762, in which we'll be expanding our mosquito control activities to include surveillance and more of an emphasis on site reduction of breeding sites, and instead of a lot of spraying. Most of our emphasis now is on spraying and adult deciding. So The grant funds here are to be used specifically for expanding our activities to include surveillance and breeding site reduction activities.
And
If I'm not
100% funding.
That's right. Yeah,
And
it's
if I'm not
100%
mistaken, that was an area that the entomology department of Mississippi State emphasized as
Right.
far as mosquito reduction goes.
Right. And included in the grant, which got approved, is to hire some part-time entomology students to assist us with this. And I think it'd be a good thing for the city to pursue.
Do we have a motion?
I would move approval of the sub-grant agreement between the City of Starkville and the Mississippi Department of Health for mosquito control activities, and that the mayor be authorized to execute the grant agreement on behalf of the city.
Second.
Motion with a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Thank you very much.
Did we leave anything out? We need to go into a closed session, discuss going into executive session. Do I have a motion to move into closed session?
I would move we go into closed session.
No.
No, you didn't.
Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of it, say aye. All those opposed, nay. We're now in closed session to discuss whether we should go into executive session. Thank you all for attending tonight.